Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to present our third and final webcast on integrated data analytics. I'm Jacque Keats, the COO of SMA, the Program Lifecycle Company, and I'm here with Gordon Kranz, a friend of the firm who has more than 40 years of technical and program management defense acquisition experience. Gordon, it's a pleasure collaborating with you on this series. It's been a lot of fun. And based on the feedback from the previous sessions, I know the audience is looking forward to this session, and I know I am. So if you want to view the earlier sessions, we've put the links in the chat.
Thank you, Jacque. I appreciate it. It's been enjoyable for me as well. I love sharing the benefits of using a disciplined program management approach to support decision making. In this session, we will independently assess the baseline we developed in the previous two sessions. Specifically, we will evaluate the cost, schedule, and technical progress to review the feasibility of the PMZAC.
Excellent. Performing an independent estimate or assessment helps to keep all stakeholders on the same page. As you know, the benefits of EVM is in its ability to support program forecasting and decision making. I'll even go further to say that it's the only predictive financial discipline. All right, we could talk about these fine points for hours, but without any further ado, let's get started.
Before we get into the details of our assessment, I want to reflect on some statements about using EVM as a program management tool, which are driving recent government policy changes and implementation.
Yes. There's been a lot of noise in social media about this topic. Recent EVM policy changes are attempting to relax the application of EVMS, particularly on OTA contracts and software programs, which I think is actually the wrong lever to pull to address the challenges the DoD and industry face as it relates to managing these programs. Keep in mind, a fool with a tool is still a fool.
Exactly. I want to engage all of you in this presentation. As I read the next few statements, please indicate whether you agree or disagree by answering the polls, and we will summarize the poll at the end of the presentation. The first statement is, EVM is a backward-looking management approach that does not help predict future performance.
Okay, looks like we've got some answers coming in, so let's move to the next statement.
Okay. The second statement, EVM does not address technical performance. Do you agree or disagree?
So it's great to bring this issue to the forefront, actually. I can see everyone engaged in the poll, so let's move into the next statement.
Okay. The third statement is that EVM is not compatible with Agile development.
Okay. Well, say it ain't so, Gordon. Say it ain't so. Yes, I've heard so many times before. So let's do one more before we get to the presentation.
All right. And the final statement is that EVM is expensive and not value added.
Well, very provocative statements for sure. And I'm very sure we will discuss these in detail throughout the rest of the presentation.
And to begin that debate, let's respond to the first statement. EVM is simply a history report and not forward-looking. This statement is false. Like Agile, EVM uses historical performance to inform PM decision-making.
Yeah.
It proactively forecasts cost, schedule, and technical issues instead of dwelling on the past.
Yep. In fact, this is the most powerful attributes of EVMS. As I said earlier, it's really the only forward-looking management discipline, and in fact, the objective of earned value is to get early warning into project performance and execution.
Yeah. The next statement, that EVM does not address technical performance, again is false. I've heard a variation of this statement. EVM only measures task completion, not technical performance. I understand how this misconception can be made, but it could not be further from the truth. The foundation of EVM is the objective measurement of technical progress independent of resources expended, meaning that progress claims are made based on a predefined objective criteria for the definition of done. Yes, the performance claims show up in the IMS as a % complete. But each task has a specific objective that contributes to the product's development. The performance is used to calculate the dollarized earned value metrics and measures.
The fact that these reports are described in dollars contributes to the misconception.
Yeah.
But we have to have a way of comparing apples and oranges. By normalizing the scope into dollars, we can summarize the work packages, control accounts, and even the project level summary to get visibility into performance.
And moving on to the next statement, that EVM is not compatible with Agile development, which is also false. This has actually been something I've been working on since 2014. In fact, Agile development practices provide detailed customer delivery progress, which, when coupled with tailored EVM processes, gives the PM daily health and status, allowing the program manager to project future cost, schedule, and technical aspects of the program.
I'd like to add to that. Whether we're using Agile or Waterfall, these are management techniques to track, plan, and monitor work accomplishments, which become quantifiable objectives we use to measure performance.
And the last statement, that EVM is expensive and has no value added, once again, this is false. If EVM is tailored to the program and unencumbered by artificial control boundaries, there is no cost.
That's right. We brought these statements up because all too often EVM is treated as a siloed system to meet government schedules rather than an integrated element of the existing management system. That perspective is as crazy as keeping two sets of books. Or, as I often say, a person with two watches never knows what time it is. So, what's the right approach? Earned value must be integrated into your internal business and management systems.
Now that we've gotten that off our chest,
Yep.
let's get back to the purpose of this session and look at the PMZAC. The PMZAC in the cost report is calculated using the monthly CAM updates to the baseline. In this case, the EAC is $101.9 million and shows a negative $2.8 million variance at complete.
Given the problems we discussed in the last session, this EAC seems quite optimistic. We should assess it for its realism.
And we do that by using various performance factors to assess the PMZAC. This method adds the actuals to date to the remaining work divided by a performance factor. Common formulas use these performance factors such as CPI and SPI as the performance factor. The first performance factor we will use is the cumulative CPI at the program level, or level 1 of the WBS. The second formula uses the level 1 SPI as a performance factor. This factor is not informative towards the end of the program since SPI always converges to 1. However, it may have some utility in the middle of the program because schedule is a leading indicator of performance.
For sure. So let's look at what the IEAC calculations are for this program.
The first IEC calculation uses the cumulative CPI as the performance factor is $104.2 million.
You know, it makes sense to use CPI as the performance factor since studies have shown that the program's performance tends to stabilize after completing 10% of the program. This calculation is referred to as the floor or the best case calculation.
Yeah. The second IEAC calculation uses cumulative schedule efficiency as a predictor of future cost performance. But caution should be exercised when using only SPI as a factor. SPI should only be used if schedule delays or accelerations are directly related to the use of additional resources. This IAC result is $104.9 million. Since the cum CPI and SPI are similar, the resulting IACs are similar as well.
That's right.
The third formula uses the product of the cumulative CPI and SPI to calculate an IEAC. In this case, the resultant IEAC is $108.8 million.
And it's important to note that the third formula is the ceiling or worst case IEAC.
Yeah. Notice that the PMZAC in the August 2030 monthly report is only $101.9 million, which is less than the best case. This indicates that the PM is missing something in their projection, or they're just being extremely optimistic?
The first question I would ask is, are they incorporating risk into their projection?
That's a good point. Let us look at the management reserve consumption as an indicator of the program's incorporation of risk. The MR consumption table shows the original MR budget was $8.8 million. And after using a portion of it for the ChemBio sensor mitigation effort, the remaining MR budget is $7.5 million. Typically, PMs assume the MR budget will be spent over the course of the program to address unforeseen, in-scope risk mitigation efforts, and thus included in their EAC. In this case, it seems like the PM did not include MR in their EAC. So if we include it, we see that the PM EAC would be $109.5 million, which is more in line with the IEAC projections.
It's important to recognize that these calculations are being done at the program level and assume that the overall performance affects each of the WBS elements equally. Digging into it deeper into the cumulative performance might allow us to apply performance factors based on each team's performance and will provide some additional insights.
Absolutely. So let's look at the application of performance factors at the second level of the WBS. In this table, we take the data from the latest EVM report at level 2 and apply a set of performance factors to establish a high and a low value for each level 2 element. In the factor 1 column, we use one of 3 factors. The first factor, highlighted in green, uses the level 1 CUME CPI of 0.95, since these elements are on track or represent future work. The second factor, highlighted in yellow, uses the second level CUME CPI, since CPI was worse than SPI. And the third factor, highlighted in peach, uses the CUME SPI as a performance factor, since the SPI is less than the CPI.
So using the SPI as a performance factor for the WBS elements makes sense because the schedule delays for those elements directly indicate the need for additional resources to recover the program.
The Factors 2 column uses a composite performance factor for the cells highlighted in orange, which calculated the respective IEAC by taking the product of CPI and SPI for that level.
That's right.
Rolling up the level 2 values for the factor 1 results in an IEAC of $109 million. And rolling up the factor 2 IEAC calculations results in a projected value of $116.1 million. We used past performance to derive a set of performance factors in this exercise, but one could also use subjective performance factors such as risk. For example, let's look at 2 of the worst performing WBSs. The reconnaissance IPT has a projected cost growth about $1.5 million, or about 5%, which seems low to me, but reviewing the IAC columns, the projected growth ranges from 10 to 15%, which seems more reasonable, but we should also factor in risk. In reviewing the 1.5 WBS element, the UAV command and control software, we see a 10% cost growth projection from the PM. But the IAC projections range from 50% using the element's CUME CPI to a 200% cost growth using the composite factor multiplying CPI and SPI.
Right.
Since SPI will converge to 1 as the work progresses, it may not be reasonable to expect all of the 200% growth. In this case, I would recommend to the PM that we use the factor 1 IEAC projection for the software and identify a risk strategy to reduce the risk of the software growing beyond more than 50%.
I agree. In fact, your recommendation is spot on for the software work in particular. But since the biggest risk of the program is the weight of the sensor payload, we need to get more insights to projected growth by reviewing the sensor payload metrics in more detail.
In reviewing the second level of the 1.3 WBS, we see the cost growth continues to diverge from the baseline. But to discern which sensors are the biggest contributors, we need to examine each of the individual sensors' performance histories to see what what they look like.
Exactly. So let's evaluate the lower levels as seen on the chart.
The progress of the EO imaging sensor tracks to plan, but the actual cost is an issue. Thus, the performance forecast of the EO sensor should be related to the respective CPI.
Right.
The thermal sensor shows that performance is lagging the planned value, but the negative cost variance is starting to turn around.
Right.
So it would be reasonable to use SPI as the performance factor. Now when we look at the Chem biosensor, we see that both the cost and the schedule are driving the negative performance. So we should use the composite performance factor where we multiply CPI and SPI to obtain the IAC projection.
Yeah, we might get a clearer picture if we look at each of the sensors' control accounts.
So as you suggested, Jacque, let us roll up the IAC by evaluating and applying performance factors at the control account level of each of the sensors, as shown on this chart. We used the same approach as we did for level 2. Factor 1 uses either the worst case of CPI and SPI at the control account level for the in-progress control accounts. And we use the level 1 cum CPI of 0.95 for elements that will be executed in the future. The factor 2 column uses the composite for the in-progress control accounts. We roll up each of the sensor control accounts to its respective WBS level, as shown in the first 3 tables. And then we roll up the sensor IEACs to the reconnaissance level, as shown in the 4th table. The reconnaissance WBS item IAC then ranges from $32.4 million to $38.7 million, which I believe factors in the risk associated with this element.
You know, that actually seems to make more sense since it's the sensors that are having the biggest issues. And in fact, I think we can get a little more detail if we dig a little deeper.
Sure.
So adding those values to the level 2 roll-up gives us a total best case IEAC of 113 million and a total worst case IEAC of 125 million. So another way to validate this conclusion is to calculate the 2 complete index, performance index, actually one of my favorite things to do, which informs the PM of the future performance required to meet the EAC.
Correct. Here is the specific formula for TCPI. It equals the work remaining divided by the expected cost remaining.
Yep.
This table shows the TCPI projections for the various PMEACs and the IEACs. The original PMEAC of 101.9 million would require the program to perform the remaining work with a 0.98 cost efficiency, which is unlikely since the current cost efficiency is only 0.95. And the future performance is rarely better than the current cumulative performance, as you highlighted earlier.
Right.
When accounting for the risk, you see that the performance required for the optimistic IEAC is 0.88, which is possible given that the current CPI is 0.95. They can perform worse and still make it.
I didn't see any pigs fly by, so I think we're okay.
When looking at the worst case IAC, we see that the program efficiency only has to be 0.72, which indicates the contractor will come in lower than this worst case number.
Yeah, after the program has completed 10%, the cost efficiency rarely improves. I mean, that's a long-standing axiom in program management. So these assessments back up the idea that an IEAC between 113 million and 125 million is reasonable. Now that we've sorted the IEAC, let's take a look at the schedule risk assessment.
Okay. Reflecting on the SRA we conducted during the last session, we see that the currently scheduled closeout date has a 0% chance of completing on time and an 80% chance of achieving the contractual closeout date on or before January 25th of 2035. The SRA also informs the PM which tasks to prioritize to maximize the chances of positively influencing the program's closeout date.
Yeah, this tells me that the program should be able to easily complete the program prior to the calculated closeout date.
Agreed.
Or contractual closeout date.
Agreed. Finally, reviewing the technical system metrics, we see that the Chem Bio sensitivity, which is directly related to its weight allocation, is not going to meet the sensitivity requirement. The UAV payload weight still meets the overall weight requirements because the underweight thermal sensor offsets the excess weight of the ChemBio sensor. By adjusting the weight allocation, the program can meet sensitivity and operational range objectives.
Okay, so now that we've evaluated the cost, schedule, and technical attributes of the program, we should summarize our findings for the PM.
The IAC projection shows that the EAC should range between 109 million and 125 million. If the program follows the worst case recommendation from the last session to fully execute the ChemBio mitigation effort, the EAC will likely approach the $125 million. We recommend that the systems team adopt the best case approach by balancing the team weight requirements among the three sensors.
Right.
This strategy is likely to keep the EAC closer to the $109 million position, ensuring cost efficiency while meeting program objectives.
By adopting the recommendations, the program should complete before January 2035 to meet the contractual closeout date.
Correct. That puts the program in the best position to achieve its technical and program objectives and highlights the need to use an integrated analytics approach to manage your programs.
Thank you for joining us for this insightful series on integrated data analytics. Today, we thoroughly examined IEAC projections, risk assessments, and program health indicators, completing the final piece of our analysis. We aim to provide a clear, data-backed framework to support forecasting and effective program management.
Absolutely, Jacque. By breaking down misconceptions, validating EACs, and aligning our assessments with realistic performance indices, we've built a solid foundation of understanding the strengths and areas of improvement within a program's lifecycle.
As we move forward, it's essential to integrate these practices into the day-to-day management and maintain that forward-looking approach. We hope these sessions have equipped you with the tools to do just that. Gordon, before we get into the questions, let's take a minute and summarize the results of our pool.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, Gordon. That was great. Now, let's take any questions that y'all might have. Type them into the chat, and we'll do our best to get them answered. I think we do have a couple of questions that came in a little bit early, so why don't we start with those?
Sure.
First one actually was from AJ, saying, can you elaborate on how EVM can be tailored to work seamlessly with agile development methodologies?
Absolutely. So there's a variety of books out there, or the guides. You know, NDIA has a guide, the DoD has a guide for government program managers. But the key is to not necessarily tailor the EVM processes, but it's to how do you figure out how to provide traceability between the earned value metrics and the agile work.
Absolutely. You know, and the agile work actually is really the objective measure of accomplishment.
Right.
Right. It's not the schedule, it's not the performance data, but it's simply the objective measure.
Work.
Exactly. Right. Yep. So we'll get another one from Scott Brunton, and it's a bit long, so let me read it, and then then you can answer that. So, how would you handle a situation where, or with Agile, a PI sprint is planned with BCWS based on story points associated with the sprint backlog, and a given planned story does not get completed. Hence, BCWP will not be able to be set to 100%. And does the sprint extend in the forecast space until the planned story is done, or does the sprint undergo a BCWS replan?
So that's an excellent question. So again, as I was alluding to earlier, is how you set up the original plan.
Yep.
Earned value basically wants you to put tasks in a schedule that you can claim progress against. Right. Agile does work at a lower level, but then you associate the work in a sprint is a set of stories.
That's right.
Which have story points. And those stories roll up to things typically called features or epics or whatever. It's either the features or the epics that end up in the IMS.
That's right.
So as you do a subset of, as you complete a story, you get to collect a certain number of story points, that kind of thing. You get a certain percentage of that feature that gets completed. So that's what is the technical influence of progress that will get rolled into the schedule and provide your percent complete for your EVM metrics.
Right.
So if you so the key here is that if you don't complete all the stories that you had projected for that sprint, the sprint stays the same. They're always their time box. They stay 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it
Right.
is. But you would then not claim 100% because you didn't complete all of the stories, and then that lack of 100% would roll into your IMS, and then that would then influence then the EVM metrics as far as being behind. Now, as far as redoing your BCWP, the
BCWS.
BCWS, you know, I'm not a fan of
I'm not
basically
either.
doing a lot of baseline
Replans,
requests,
right.
changes, and replans. You should basically accept the variance so that you can learn from it.
That's right.
In fact, that's a foundation of Agile and of EVM.
That's right.
It's the variances that tell you where you're at with your project, and then helps you understand what you should do next.
Right. You know, the feature itself isn't done until requirements are met, right?
Right.
And you're going to create a bunch of stories to eventually retire all those requirements.
Exactly.
Right. But in addition to that, just like in Agile, you want to know what your velocity is, you want to know what your backlog is. Well, in learned value, you also want to know what your variances are, right?
Right.
Because otherwise you end up with the A12.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one from Tanya. Why do you think EVM is often misunderstood as a backward-looking discipline, and how can we better communicate its predictive value to stakeholders?
So I would say that the reason that it's backward, that people say that it's backward looking, and I think you actually alluded to it in the
Right.
earlier in the presentation, is because you're looking at a monthly report.
Yep.
And that monthly report, because of accounting reasons and a variety of other situations, is really can be 2 weeks old, can be up to a month old. But the reality is you're not waiting, if you're doing earned value correctly, if you're managing your program correctly, you're not waiting for that monthly report.
That's right.
But that monthly report, yes, it's historical, but you try to learn from those variances that show up in the monthly report.
Right.
And then the benefit of EVM is that it provides you with information that allows you to then proactively forecast.
That's right.
What should you do next to address those variances.
Exactly. And what the whole intent of it is to give you enough runway to do corrective actions to be able to recover, your schedule and time.
Exactly.
Or to address or to take advantage of opportunities, retire risk.
Right.
And all of that. But it goes back to, and I used to ask this question all the time. Would you get in the car and start driving cross country without having any idea where the hotels are, where the gas stations are, charging stations? If you're driving an electric vehicle today, of course you wouldn't, right? Most people wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Because you end up sleeping in the car and having to call AAA. Okay. The next one's from Liz. How do you determine when to use CPI, SPI, or composite performance factors in the IAC calculations? That's a great question.
It is an excellent question. We talked a little bit about it, maybe not in enough detail, but so for example, as you had talked about earlier in the presentation, again, is that the cumulative CPI is an indicator of your future performance.
Right.
You're not going to do better. You're likely going to do the same or worse. So using the historical performance for cost, that ends up being a good indicator for best case almost any time in the program.
Right.
From an SPI perspective, you don't really want to use it early because you're getting, typically you're executing well and
Right.
you get a pretty good SPI up front. Where using SPI as a potential indicator, as we suggested, is that if the work to recover that if the reason that you're behind is and the way to recover is by adding additional resources, which is cost.
Yep.
Then you could use SPI as an indicator in the middle of the program, and then towards the end of the program, SPI doesn't work that well because it converges to one. So if you use, it's always going to look really good. So at the beginning, at the end, SPI is going to give you a fairly positive number. SPI in the middle is potential indicator again if the recovery plan is associated with using additional resources,
right.
Spending cost.
Right. Yeah. The thing is too, is you don't have to make those decisions up front, right? You could run the different IEAC calculations, and I think there's at least six I'm aware of,
Right.
because some of them are factored, multiplied, and so on. But you can look at those, across a particular work package and get a sense of where it is. And in addition to that, I think it's also intended to give you kind of a litmus test on your EAC.
Yes.
Too many programs lock down the EAC and don't let it change.
Right.
And so you lose the visibility into what's happening as actuals come into the system. And so the IEAC alone, gives you a very good way of tracking, the impact of the performance you are taking, et cetera, right?
Yeah. And the interesting part about this is that these are subjective, right? So these are formula based.
That's right.
That are kind of, traditionally used, but you can make up your own subjective just purely based on, what you know of the program, something that you may be aware of.
Yeah.
It's maybe already in the risk management plan, but it's not incorporated into the schedule yet.
Right.
But so these performance factors you select to try to figure out feasibility of the PMEAC, it can be very subjective. But as long as it's based on some knowledge or some information you have about the program.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this one's from Lucky. How should teams decide the appropriate allocation of MR throughout the program lifecycle? That's a good question.
It is a good question, and it's unfortunately a lot of PMs use a standard 10%, kind of MR, but if you're doing your risk management process correctly, you're identifying risks up front in the program, and you're establishing a risk mitigation strategy that associated with it is an estimated cost to address those risks, or potentially address those risks. And it's that cost that you're projecting that you could spend should influence how much you set aside for the MR. So it's got to be directly related to your risk mitigation.
Absolutely. Because it's got to be about the known unknowns, right?
Yeah.
All right. This one's from Donna. And so she asked, was RTG schedules something VA systems used, or were they used by other defense contractors?
I don't understand RTG schedules.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is either. Don, if you could define that in the chat, we'll give you an answer. Okay, here's another one from return to green schedules. Something BAU use. So
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably, there's several vendors out there or contractors that use those return to green schedules, which are schedules that you're looking to get back to a green. But I think we focus too much on being green, and rather than focusing on what are the risks we're encountering, what's driving performance, are there things we can do to mitigate it? I think that your energy is better put into those activities, right? And also looking at the earned value and the metrics over the life of multiple programs to look at where have you forecasted well, where have you not. It's Wayne talked about this actually. I think he actually had a paper he'd written about the focus on too much focus on green.
Yeah.
And it's actually a good read.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, the thing is if you focus on metrics, you get metrics.
That's right.
Metrics should help you understand where you're at with the program so that you can basically deliver product.
That's right.
If you focus on metrics, like I said, you'll deliver metrics, and you won't really have any idea what your true technical progress is.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so this was from Blake. What are the limitations of using SPI as a performance factor near the end of the program? I think we've addressed this one.
Yes.
But thank you, Blake. And then this is another one from Scott, which says, or from Scott Brunton, that says, should TCPI also be included as a measure of credibility of the EAC? And I think we talked about that.
We discussed that.
In fact, it's one of my favorite things to do, because you'll sit in a meeting and the program team will tell you, hey, we got a plan to get back to green. We're gonna recover. It's gonna be, we're okay. And then you put up an IEAC or a TCPI calculation, and you get and the see pigs flying through the room, right? It's like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or when pigs fly, right? Okay, I think this is our last one. Yep. So okay, I think we got a couple more coming. All right.
Okay.
So with an 80% likelihood of meeting contractual closeout dates, what's the additional actions you would recommend improving confidence in the schedule?
So the thing about running a schedule risk assessment is that it provides a multitude of data. It not only provides you with a probability of achieving certain milestones, end of
Yeah.
the program, interim milestones, that sort of thing, but it also helps the program manager identify tasks that can influence the success or failure
Yeah.
of achieving those milestones. And with that information, then you look at those tasks and how do you focus your attention on the tasks that are most significant contributors,
Right.
and either enter them in as a risk mitigation strategy, or just, maybe you decide to add additional resources if it's really critical.
Yeah.
But so the way to increase your confidence is by looking at all of the data of the SRA, and then trying to do something about the tasks that may be bad actors.
Yep, absolutely. So I think I'll take this next one,
Okay.
but you can certainly, comment
Sure.
in. And, this is from Alan Christinik, and it's a great question, actually. It says, what project analytic and reporting software is recommended? Additionally, as a visual person, presenting charts would help the PM to determine the EAC. And first, I'll take the second part first. I agree completely. I like the visual charts. I think that it's a great way to communicate with the program team because they're engineers, they're technical people, and I think it gives, they can see,
Right.
where the variances are, where the gaps are, the IEACs and so on. So I agree with that, Alan. I think in terms of analytic tools, and then I said this even, when we were when I was running Decker, and we were delivering tracker to everybody, is look, at the end of the day, right, the market kills off the bad tools. So, and there are a lot of great tools out in the market, right? In terms of things like WebEV, there's, For Project, there's Cobra, of course, and other tools out there that do a great job. Winsight, is an older tool, but still around. And then you've also got the Encore analytic solutions, which, Gary has done an incredible job, with what he's done in terms of analytics and analysis. And those are all great, great tools. So I think the thing, though, and I think this is important to remember, I said it earlier, and I don't mean to be pejorative, but a fool with a tool is still a fool, right?
Yeah,
You've got to
yeah.
know, it's important to understand, as I know Alan does, it's important to understand, what are the metrics supposed to tell you? What are you supposed to glean
Right.
from, from the status that you're getting? And then, how do you guide the program team to make good decisions based on the data that you're presenting? And I think that's a critical thing.
Yes, I agree. I'd like to add to that, any tool that you're going to use to kind of convey status needs to be in the context of the end system being
That's right.
delivered.
That's right.
It's great to look at a spreadsheet and say that, here's an SPI, CPI, here's a cost variance, that sort of thing, to read a WBS name, that sort of stuff. But if you can visualize it by drawing some kind of a notional picture of what the end product looks like, and you kind of associate where the problem WBS element is in a picture of the system, maybe the radar of
Exactly.
an airplane or
Yep.
something. When I was at GD, what we did is we would create these boards where we'd show the status, cost, schedule, status, that kind of thing. And then we would notionally, if it was early on in the program, we'd draw wire diagrams of what the system sort of looked like at that, so
Right.
that we could provide a visualization so if the janitor walked by and happened to be looking at the thing, they would know which system was having problems, right?
Right.
So I mean, that's the
Right.
key is visualization in the context of the product being delivered.
Right. In fact, we're having lunch with AJ yesterday. He brought that topic up and said, wouldn't it be cool if you could take
Yeah.
the CAD drawings
Yeah.
and show them as red, yellow, green, and
Right.
then be able to click on that and have it
Right.
blow out
Expand it,
to, all the metrics,
click
right?
into the actual 3D drawings
Yeah.
and all
And
that.
I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think this is our last question. It's from Pauline. So how can SRA findings be used to build more robust mitigation plans for critical tasks?
I think we
talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, basically the SRA helps you identify the tasks that have the greatest opportunity or risk, and which means that
Yep.
if you focus on that task and you complete it earlier, it has the ability to actually, accelerate your schedule.
Yep.
If you focus on that task just to make sure that it completes, or it's got a large tail as far as the risk associated with not completing it on time, you put it in your risk mitigation strategy. And
Right.
you do it as part of the overall planning process.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, guys, these were great questions. And thank you very much for, for being able, for working with us. We got one more thing, though, that we want to do. I know that AJ wanted to say a few words.
This was such a great way to do our, get this 250th town hall.
Wow.
Nice.
Is that
Nice.
something?
That's very
Yeah.
nice.
I thought the entire series was absolutely brilliant, Gordon,
Thank
Jacque.
you.
Yeah.
And in particular, I loved how this third episode brought it all together. So it's fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Gordon, we have a few gifts for you, a paperweight
Oh, awesome.
from the town hall staff here
All right.
and SMA,
Thank you.
and a drink well mug.
Oh, nice.
I know you're temporarily in Arizona, so that'll help you stay cool.
Oh, there you go.
Cool and
Well, thank
hydrated,
you very
right?
much. I appreciate
Congratulations.
it.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well done.
That was a
Thank
great
you.
collaboration.
Well done.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody, for joining. And we will see you at the next event. Stay tuned for more information.